When the motorcyclist kicked the dog, he had no idea that this seemingly minor act would set off an irreversible chain of events. What appeared to be a moment of thoughtless anger quickly escalated into a nightmare that changed his life forever. Who would have thought that one kick, born of reckless impulse, would become the catalyst for his eventual downfall? Stay with us to uncover the gripping story of how it all unfolded. Before diving in, drop a comment with 1 if you stand against animal cruelty. The late afternoon sun streamed through the ancient oak trees, casting shimmering patterns of light on the cobblestone paths of Starlight Brosey. Jared Leto strolled slowly, his footsteps echoing in the rare tranquility of the neighborhood. Beside him trotted Maxwell, his loyal husky with striking white and gray fur, panting lightly under the summer heat. The rhythmic sound of Maxwell's breath paired with Jared's steady steps created a soothing harmony in the peaceful yet fleeting calm of the streets. The neighborhood seemed frozen in time, with its historic charm etched into every corner. Vintage buildings with weathered wooden frames, tall windows, and ivy-clad wrought-iron balconies. This world was a stark contrast to the chaotic, high-pressure film set Jared had left just hours earlier. He gazed upward, watching the sunlight dance through the leaves, feeling as though the stars themselves had descended to the ground. Maxwell suddenly halted, ears pricked up as if detecting a distant sound. Jared smiled, crouching to pat the dog gently. "What's caught your attention, buddy?" he murmured, his voice blending seamlessly with the serene air. Maxwell tilted his head briefly, his clear blue eyes thoughtful, then resumed leading Jared along the street, as if knowing the way better than anyone. As they turned a corner, a stark and unexpected sight emerged before Jared. It was a weathered building with a sign that read, "Shadow and Light," its black painted letters standing out against the faded wooden backdrop. The building's red brick facade bore the marks of time, its discolored patches a testament to years gone by. This bar, with its gritty, almost foreboding appearance, clashed sharply with the surrounding neighborhood's quaint cafes and curated boutique shops. Jared paused, his gaze taking in every detail. Motorcycles were lined up neatly along the curb, their hulking forms and aggressive designs exuding a defiant aura. Somewhere in the distance, a motorcycle engine roared to life, shattering the quiet atmosphere of the street. A faint tension began to settle in the air, a feeling Jared couldn't quite put into words. Maxwell tugged gently on his leash, sensing the shift in energy. Jared knelt down, stroking the dog's back in reassurance while keeping his eyes fixed on the scene before him. A curiosity mixed with unease stirred within him. Why did a place like this exist in Starlight Bros? A haven of charm and comfort. Near the bar's entrance, Jared's eyes fell on a public fountain partially obscured by 2 parked motorcycles. Maxwell's tail wagged eagerly as Jared led him to the fountain. Pulling out a collapsible silicone bowl from his jacket pocket, Jared filled it with cool water and placed it down for Maxwell to drink. As the dog lapped up the water, Jared kept a watchful eye on the bar. Men clad in leather jackets and heavy boots moved in and out of the building, their faces a mix of smug confidence and wary caution, their eyes constantly scanning the surroundings. As Maxwell drank contentedly, a burly man with tattooed arms approached the fountain. His gaze shifted to Maxwell, and a sneering grin crept across his face. "Nice husky," the man said, his voice a blend of mock admiration and veiled hostility. "But a vicious dog with a cowardly owner." Jared stiffened but held his composure. His hand moved instinctively to Maxwell's back, a calming gesture for the dog and a subtle show of control. Before the situation could escalate, a young waitress stepped out of the bar, her cheerful demeanor cutting through the tension like sunlight piercing storm clouds. "What a handsome dog!" she exclaimed, crouching to let Maxwell sniff her hand. The dog wagged his tail, his earlier tension melting away in her presence. "He's better than most men in that bar," she added quietly, her tone laced with subtle defiance as she straightened and disappeared back inside. Jared watched her leave, intrigued by her confidence tinged with caution. His attention returned to the tattooed man who lingered near the fountain, his posture still vaguely threatening. Maxwell finished his water and looked up, tongue lolling in contentment. Jared packed away the bowl, stood up, and tightened his grip on the leash. The amber glow of dusk bathed the street as Jared turned away, the bar's ominous silhouette receding into the background. Shadows stretched long and thin along the cobblestones, whispering secrets only the night would hold. Maxwell looked up at Jared, his eyes shining with trust and readiness for the next step. Jared smiled faintly, patting the dog's head as they walked away, leaving the unsettling presence of shadow and light behind, for now. "Let's go, Maxwell," Jared murmured, his voice steady but unable to mask the undercurrent of tension in his chest. They moved away from the fountain, walking slowly along the curb to maintain distance from the bar. Yet Jared's eyes couldn't stop scanning the surroundings. Men in leather jackets, their bodies inked with intricate tattoos, moved in and out of the bar with an air of unpredictability. One wiry man with a long ponytail stared directly at Jared, his piercing eyes attempting to uncover every secret he held. Jared felt the gaze but chose not to react, quickening his steps and resting a reassuring hand on Maxwell's back, a gesture meant to calm both the dog and himself. The street grew quieter as they walked on, the sparse glow of streetlights barely holding back the encroaching shadows. They reached a secluded corner where the light dimmed, leaving only the faint echoes of bar activity behind them. Jared stopped and glanced around, his instincts unwilling to overlook any hint of danger. Maxwell suddenly lifted his head, his ears perked sharply. Jared knelt beside him, placing a steadying hand on the dog's shoulder, feeling the tension ripple through its muscles. Maxwell didn't bark, but a low, steady growl rumbled in his throat, his gaze fixed on the end of the darkened alley. Jared squinted into the shadows, straining to make out a figure emerging slowly toward them. "It's okay," Jared whispered, more to himself than the dog. He straightened, his focus unwavering on the approaching figure. The tattooed man from earlier stepped into the faint streetlight, stopping just a few feet away. His cold gaze drifted from Jared to Maxwell before settling back on Jared. "Where you off to in such a hurry?" he asked, his tone dripping with mockery. "Don't want to stop and have a little chat?" Jared inhaled deeply, feeling the dampness of his palms. He forced himself to remain calm, meeting the man's gaze with steady determination. "I'm not looking for trouble," he said, his voice low and firm. The man sneered, stepping closer. "Oh, but sometimes trouble finds you, doesn't it?" His eyes flicked to Maxwell, glinting with a menacing curiosity. "Nice dog, but I don't think you've got the guts to keep him." Maxwell immediately stepped in front of Jared, his growl growing louder as his back arched defensively. Jared clenched his fists, the air around them thick with tension. He measured every move, aware that one wrong step could escalate things beyond control. Just as Jared opened his mouth to respond, a sharp voice cut through the charged atmosphere. "What's going on here?" Jared turned to see Vivian, the young waitress from the bar, stepping out with a metal tray in hand. Her expression was calm yet commanding as her eyes locked onto the tattooed man. "Not your business," the man growled, but Vivian didn't flinch. "I think you've already made my customer uncomfortable enough," she said, her tone firm. "It's time for you to head back to the bar and leave them alone." The man hesitated, his eyes flicking between Jared and Vivian. Finally, he let out a dry, mocking laugh. "I'll let you off this time," he muttered, turning and stomping off into the shadows, his heavy boots echoing on the pavement. As he disappeared, Jared exhaled deeply, feeling the weight on his shoulders lighten slightly. He turned to Vivian, his gratitude clear in his eyes. "Thank you," he said, his voice soft but sincere. Vivian shrugged with a small smile. "Don't worry about it. I'm used to handling guys like that." She knelt down to pet Maxwell, her expression softening. This dog is really special. You're lucky to have him." Jared nodded, looking at Maxwell with pride. "I know," he replied quietly. "And I won't let anyone hurt him." Vivian stood up, her smile widening. "It was nice meeting you," she said before walking away, her presence leaving the air lighter. The overcast evening cast a pale gray hue over the parking lot, where only a few old cars sat scattered. Jared tugged gently on Maxwell's leash, the husky trotting calmly by his side, relishing the rare moment of quiet. But the peace didn't last long. A sharp voice shattered the stillness. "I told you yesterday. Your gang isn't welcome here anymore." Jared's head snapped up, his eyes quickly surveying the scene ahead. Vivian stood firm in front of a group of 5 bikers. They were tall and imposing, their scowls and sharp eyes radiating menace. Though her voice was strong, a note of tension betrayed her unease. "After what you did last time, my boss made it clear. Get out of here now!" A burly man with a shaved head stepped forward, a mocking grin spreading across his scarred face. "Move aside, sweetheart," he growled, his voice a gravelly rumble. "Or we'll move you ourselves." The other bikers laughed, their harsh chuckles echoing ominously. Jared felt Maxwell stiffen beside him, the dog's ears alert and eyes fixed on the group. Jared hesitated, his instincts torn between stepping in and ensuring Maxwell's safety. He tightened his grip on the leash, his gaze flicking nervously over the scene. Before he could act, another group of bikers appeared unexpectedly. Emerging from a rusty bus nearby, the newcomers exuded an air of quiet authority. Jared recognized them as unlikely allies. They quickly formed a protective barrier around Vivian, their stance radiating readiness. At the forefront was a woman with a commanding presence, her sharp gaze cutting through the tension like a blade. "Do you understand?" she said, her voice low but carrying a weight that seemed to thicken the air. "It's time for you to leave." The troublemakers hesitated, the arrogance in their eyes dimming slightly. One of them, a tall man with a shaved head, leaned in and muttered something to the leader, as though weighing the option of retreat. Sensing the situation could erupt into violence, Jared acted quickly. He tightened Maxwell's leash and gently tugged the dog away from the scene. Maxwell obediently followed, though his sharp gaze never left the group. Jared walked away silently, each step deliberate to avoid drawing attention. As they passed through the parking lot, Jared's eyes landed on something that made his stomach drop. The aggressive tiger emblem with sharp claws on the biker's vest sent a chill down his spine. It was the same symbol he had seen earlier at the Shadow and Light Bar, a place steeped in rumors about a dangerous motorcycle gang. It wasn't until they were a safe distance away that Jared felt he could breathe again. He knelt down beside Maxwell, running a comforting hand over the dog's fur, feeling the familiar warmth of his loyal companion. "Don't worry, Maxwell," he whispered, his voice low but firm. "We won't let them bother us again." Yet, deep inside, Jared couldn't shake the unease. These bikers weren't just random troublemakers. They were part of something bigger, something more dangerous, that loomed over the neighborhood he had grown to call home. Jared glanced back, the parking lot now out of sight, fading into a distant memory. He could sense that today's confrontation was just the beginning. Whether he liked it or not, he knew he couldn't avoid getting involved. Those men would return, and when they did, Jared would have to be ready, not just to protect Maxwell, but to defend the fragile peace of his community. The sun dipped lower on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of crimson. Jared tightened his grip on Maxwell's leash, drawing strength from the dog's steady presence beside him. "Let's go, Maxwell," he said, his eyes glinting with determination. "We've got work to do." The cobblestone streets of the neighborhood, shaded by rows of trees, felt like a sanctuary after the tension at Shadow and Light. Dappled sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting playful patterns on the sidewalk as Jared strolled slowly, Maxwell trotting faithfully beside him. The gentle breeze carried the scent of jasmine from nearby gardens, infusing the air with a calming fragrance. Turning a corner, Jared spotted a quaint little cafe nestled beneath the shade of a large oak tree. Its vintage-style iron chairs and tables sat cozily under twinkling string lights that looped through the branches above. It felt like a slice of serenity, exactly what they needed after the chaos earlier. Choosing a quiet table in the corner of the outdoor patio, Jared sat down, letting Maxwell lie at his feet. The soothing ambiance, paired with the distant hum of conversations and birdsong, offered a brief respite. Not long after, a young waitress with a warm smile and a white apron approached. Her name tag read, Vivian. "Good afternoon," she greeted cheerfully, her smile softening further as she noticed Maxwell. "And who's this handsome fellow?" Jared chuckled, appreciating her friendly demeanor. "This is Maxwell. I hope it's okay if he's here with me." Vivian waved off his concern with a reassuring laugh. "As long as he's well-behaved, he's more than welcome. What can I get for you today?" Jared ordered a coffee and a slice of cake, making sure to request a little something for Maxwell as well, earning another amused laugh from Vivian. But just as Jared took his first sip of coffee, the tranquility shattered. A burly man in a leather vest, arms covered in tattoos, strode past their table. His eyes burned with hostility, and his lips twisted into a sneer. "Filthy animals," he muttered loudly enough for Jared to hear, his gaze fixed on Maxwell. Jared looked up, his sharp eyes meeting the biker's. Before he could react, the man suddenly lashed out, kicking Maxwell. The dog yelped in pain, the sound slicing through the peaceful atmosphere like a knife. Maxwell jumped to his feet, growling low, his body tense with fear and defense. Jared shot to his feet, the chair scraping loudly against the brick patio. "What the hell did you just do?" he demanded, his voice quiet but carrying a dangerous edge. The man smirked, his arrogance palpable. "Control your beast," he spat, glaring down at Maxwell. "Or do you let him bare his teeth at anyone he pleases?" Jared placed a steady hand on Maxwell's back, calming the trembling dog. "Maxwell only reacts to threats," he said, his voice a measured calm that hinted at the storm beneath. "And you, sir, are the threat." The biker's smirk faltered, but he doubled down, sneering, "Coward dog, coward owner." Jared's composure snapped for a brief second. He stepped closer, the intensity in his gaze forcing the man to back off slightly. The tension was palpable, drawing the attention of nearby patrons. "Leave," Jared said, his voice low and firm, "before I lose my patience." The biker hesitated, looking around at the growing crowd of watchful eyes. Realizing he was outnumbered, he spat on the ground in one last act of defiance. "You'll regret this," he growled, turning on his heel and stomping away. Vivian appeared moments later, her expression a mix of concern and apology. "I'm so sorry about that," she said softly. "Are you and Maxwell okay?" Jared nodded, though his attention was solely on Maxwell. He crouched to examine the dog, gently running his hands along Maxwell's body to ensure there were no serious injuries. Maxwell licked his hand as if to reassure him, and Jared exhaled in relief. "We're fine," he said, looking up at Vivian. "But thank you." Vivian leaned closer and whispered, "Those guys have been causing trouble all week. If anything happens, don't hesitate to let us know." Jared simply nodded. As he sat back down, stroking Maxwell's fur, the peace of the cafe slowly returned. But inside, Jared remained alert. He knew this wasn't the last time he would have to face men like that. Jared sat quietly, but his heart pounded in his chest. The fierce tiger emblem on the vest of the man earlier haunted his mind. That image, sharp, menacing, reminded him of the troublemakers at Shadow and Light. Jared refused to believe it was a coincidence. Something sinister connected these events, and deep down he knew their paths would cross again. Taking a deep breath, he pushed aside his unease. Right now, Maxwell needed his focus. "All right, Maxwell," he said, his voice softening as he placed the steak in front of his loyal husky. "You've earned this. Enjoy." Maxwell lifted his head, his bright eyes sparkling as he sniffed the steak. His tail wagged gently before he began devouring the meal with gusto. A small smile tugged at Jared's lips. For a fleeting moment, the sight of Maxwell's happiness eased his tension. But deep within, he couldn't shake the feeling that storm clouds were gathering on the horizon. Glancing at his watch, Jared realized their break was nearly over. He reached down to gently stroke Maxwell, his fingers brushing through the dog's soft fur. "We've got to go, buddy. But first I need a quick stop at the restroom. Wait here for me, okay?" Maxwell tilted his head, his ears perking up as if considering Jared's words. Then, with a contented sigh, the dog leaned back against the chair, exuding an air of calm. Jared chuckled, shaking his head. "You're such a little old man," he muttered, tying Maxwell's leash securely to the table leg. As Vivian, a familiar waitress, passed by, Jared flagged her down. "Vivian, could you keep an eye on Maxwell for a moment? I'll be right back." Vivian smiled warmly. "Of course, Jared. Don't worry, I've got him." Grateful, Jared nodded and headed inside the cafe. He weaved through the bustling tables and made his way to the restroom at the back of the hall. But when he arrived, he groaned at the sight of a long line. With a resigned sigh, Jared resolved to wait, telling himself to be quick. Yet as he stood there, an inexplicable sense of unease crept over him, like an unseen force warning him of trouble. Shaking off the feeling, Jared reassured himself Maxwell was safe under Vivian's watchful eye. Wasn't he? 10 agonizing minutes passed before Jared finally returned to the patio. The scene that greeted him froze him in his tracks. Maxwell, his loyal companion, was sprawled on the ground, panting heavily and trembling. "Where's Vivian?" Jared muttered, his eyes darting around in desperation but finding no sign of her. Without hesitation, he dashed to Maxwell's side, his heart sinking. "Maxwell, what happened? Are you okay? Please don't do this." Maxwell whimpered softly, his cloudy eyes searching Jared's face as if trying to communicate. Kneeling down, Jared cradled the dog in his arms, his voice trembling as he shouted, "Someone, please, water! I need water!" Andrea, a younger waitress, hurried over with a bottle of water. "Here," she said, her face pale with concern. Jared carefully lifted Maxwell's head, trying to help him drink. Seconds dragged on like hours, but Maxwell managed to swallow a small amount of water. His breathing remained labored, and his body still shook violently. Jared turned to Andrea, his tone urgent. "We need a vet. Right now." Andrea nodded, fumbling for her phone as Jared clung to Maxwell. Rage and helplessness churned within him. Whatever had happened, Jared vowed not to let whoever hurt Maxwell get away with it. Scanning the patio, Jared's mind flashed to the image of the fierce tiger badge. He clenched his fists, fury and determination blazing in his eyes. He knew this wasn't over. Vivian returned hurriedly, her face flushed with guilt. "I'm so sorry," she gasped. "The kitchen called me away, so I asked Andrea to keep an eye on Maxwell. I didn't think—" Andrea interjected, her voice trembling. A man approached Maxwell. He seemed friendly, so I didn't suspect anything when he gave Maxwell a sausage. But now I think something wasn't right. Jared's jaw tightened. "What did he look like?" Andrea hesitated, then described. He had a beard, was stocky, with a mohawk, and he wore a leather vest with a tiger emblem. The description hit Jared like a punch to the gut. The man from the bar, the one who had threatened them. "Vivian!" Jared turned to the waitress, his voice sharp. "Is there a vet nearby?" Vivian pointed down the street. 3 blocks that way, left at the next intersection, there's a clinic." Without a second thought, Jared scooped Maxwell into his arms. The dog's weight was substantial, but Jared didn't falter. Leaving a generous tip and a hurried thank you, he bolted out of the cafe. Running through the streets of Starlight Produce, Jared's heart raced alongside his pounding footsteps. Maxwell whimpered weakly, fueling his urgency. Onlookers stared at the man carrying the large dog, but Jared paid no heed. The 3 blocks felt endless. When the green cross sign of the veterinary clinic finally came into view, Jared practically crashed through the door. "Help me!" he shouted, his voice raw with desperation. "My dog's been poisoned!" A woman in a green scrub top, her name tag reading, "Doctor." "Harry!" rushed out. "Bring him here," she said, guiding Jared into the treatment room. Gently, Jared laid Maxwell on the steel examination table. His hands trembled as he released his hold, afraid it might be the last time he touched his loyal companion. Dr. Harry worked quickly and methodically. "Do you know what happened?" she asked, her focus laser-sharp on Maxwell. Jared recounted the events. The strange man, the sausage. Dr. Harry nodded grimly. "We'll need to run a blood test to identify the toxin. In the meantime, I'll administer activated charcoal to neutralize it and start IV fluids to flush it out." As the medical team worked, Jared was escorted to the waiting room. He sank into a chair, his mind racing with countless thoughts. That man. He did this on purpose. He wanted to kill Maxwell. About 30 minutes later, Dr. Harry entered the room. "We've stabilized Maxwell, but he's still in danger," he said gravely. "We found traces of narcotics and rat poison in his system. Thankfully, we caught it in time. With antidotes and proper care, he has a chance of recovery." A small weight lifted off Jared's shoulders, but his anger flared anew. He swore he wouldn't let Maxwell's attacker get away with this. Maxwell wasn't just a dog. He was family. Jared would fight to protect him. Jared looked up, determination blazing in his eyes. The journey to ensure justice for Maxwell had only begun, and he wouldn't stop until it was served. As night fell, the yellow glow from the windows of the shadow and light bar spilled onto the street, casting a tense and ominous ambiance. Jared stood across from the bar, his body taut like a drawn bowstring, his gaze fixed on the bikers congregating inside. The sound of boisterous laughter and clinking bottles emanated from the bar, creating an air of unrest. This wasn't just a meeting spot for a group of men. It was a hub of chaos that the neighborhood had endured for far too long. Jared turned to a weary-looking bartender standing nearby, worry etched on the man's face. "How long has this been going on?" Jared asked, his voice low but resolute. The bartender sighed, his shoulders slumping. "Months now," he replied bitterly. "We've tried to avoid conflict, but they keep pushing. People have gotten hurt. One waitress ended up in the hospital just for trying to stop them from smashing the place up." Jared clenched his fists, the quiet fury within him threatening to spill over. "You shouldn't have to work under these conditions. Where's your boss?" The bartender shook his head. "He's scared of them. Told us to hold out until things settle, but I don't think it's going to stop." Jared nodded slowly, his expression darkening as thoughts of retribution flickered through his mind. But he reminded himself that this wasn't just about Maxwell or the injustice faced by the staff. It was about the safety of the entire community. Pulling his phone from his pocket, Jared quickly dialed Sheriff Hugh Jackman. "Hugh, I need your help," he said, his tone steady and urgent. "There's a group of bikers causing trouble at Shadow and Light, and I suspect they're involved in illegal activities. Maxwell, my dog was attacked by one of them, and they're threatening this whole neighborhood." "I understand, Jared," Hugh replied, his voice serious but reassuring. "Stay put. Don't engage. We'll be there shortly." Jared hung up, his eyes sweeping over the aggressive figures inside the bar. Relief flickered through him at the thought of reinforcements arriving soon. But he couldn't shake the unease for the innocent workers, patrons, and even himself, who were at the mercy of the looming threat. Not long after, the piercing wail of police sirens shattered the neighborhood's uneasy quiet. Red and blue lights bathed the street, illuminating the bar like a beacon of reckoning. Jared stood firm, watching as officers began to surround the building methodically. The bar's doors burst open, and a group of bikers rushed out, only to be swiftly intercepted. "Freeze!" a commanding voice rang out. The bikers resisted, but the officers' coordinated efforts quickly subdued them. Jared felt a wave of relief wash over him as he watched the officers take control. But as he glanced through the grimy bar windows, his chest tightened. Inside, chaos still reigned. A brawl had erupted between the remaining bikers and bar staff. The sound of crashing furniture and shattering glass filled the air. "There are still people inside," Jared shouted to a nearby officer. The tactical team immediately stormed in, their actions swift and decisive. Moments later, the noise subsided, replaced by the clink of handcuffs and the subdued murmurs of officers. An officer emerged from the bar and nodded at Jared. "We found a large stash of illegal substances inside," he confirmed. "This wasn't just a hotspot for violence, it was a distribution center. These guys won't be a threat to your community anymore." Jared nodded, a mix of relief and lingering frustration. The image of Maxwell in pain and the helplessness of the bar's staff still haunted him. "They'll pay for everything they've done," Jared said, his voice resolute. As the officers secured the scene and loaded the perpetrators into police vehicles, Jared turned to leave. The flashing lights dimmed behind him, but he knew justice had been served. He would return to Maxwell, ensuring his companion was cared for and the neighborhood was safer. The flashing red and blue lights cast an eerie glow over the parking lot, drawing a growing crowd of onlookers. Conversations buzzed like an undercurrent, their murmurs mixing with the sounds of the police operation. Each suspect was systematically handcuffed, read their rights, and led to waiting patrol cars. Jared stood still, his sunglasses concealing the torrent of emotions behind his eyes. He knew he had done what was necessary, securing justice for Maxwell and the community. But just as he turned to leave, a familiar face in the crowd froze him in place. Among the suspects being led away, Jared recognized the biker who had kicked Maxwell at the cafe. The man wore the same leather vest emblazoned with a snarling tiger emblem, his face contorted with anger and fear as he realized who Jared was. Their eyes locked, and time seemed to stand still. The biker struggled against the officer holding him, snarling, "You'll regret getting involved in this." Jared stepped forward slowly, maintaining his composure yet exuding an undeniable authority. "You know," he said, his voice low and steady, "there's a lesson you should remember. Never harm an innocent animal." The biker sneered, spitting on the ground. "I hope that dog dies," he snarled, his eyes filled with defiance. Jared stood tall, his gaze unwavering, burning with determination. "Maxwell isn't going to die," he replied coldly. "But now you'll have plenty of time to think about why you acted the way you did." With that, Jared turned away, leaving the biker spewing curses in his wake. Police officers quickly shoved the man into a waiting squad car, slamming the door and putting an end to the encounter. Jared walked away, feeling a sense of relief knowing the threat had been neutralized. As he moved through the bustling streets, the atmosphere around him seemed to shift. The tension of the morning gave way to a quiet resolve as he made his way toward the veterinary clinic, where Maxwell was recovering. When he arrived, Dr. Harry was waiting. "Mr. Leto," he said, his tired smile reassuring, "I have good news. Maxwell is stable. The antidote is working, and the supportive care measures are effective." Jared felt a wave of relief wash over him. "Thank you, Doctor. What's the next step?" he asked. Dr. Harry led him to the recovery area, explaining the monitoring procedures for the next 24 hours and Maxwell's special dietary regimen. When they reached Maxwell's kennel, Jared saw the dog lying on a soft bed, hooked up to several monitors. Maxwell's tail wagged weakly when he saw Jared. Kneeling to meet Maxwell's eyes, Jared spoke softly. "Hey, buddy, we made it. All the bad guys are gone." Maxwell responded with a loving gaze, and Jared couldn't help but smile. As Jared prepared to leave the clinic, his attention was drawn to a small TV in the reception area. A local news report was covering the arrests at the Shadow and Light Bar, highlighting numerous charges against the biker gang, particularly for animal cruelty. One detail that gave Jared relief was the lack of any mention of his involvement, just as Sheriff Hugh had promised. The report concluded with news that the bar would remain closed pending further investigation, signaling hope for positive changes in the community. Jared stepped outside into the cool evening air, feeling a sense of calm after a long and tense day. On his walk back to the hotel, Jared reflected on the day's events. He had not only protected Maxwell but also helped improve safety in the neighborhood. What began as a simple walk to prepare for his role had turned into a battle for survival, testing both his acting skills and his real-life courage. When he reached his hotel, Jared's phone buzzed with a new message. It was from Sheriff Hugh. "Operation successful. All suspects in custody. Your involvement remains confidential." "Well done, Jared." A small smile crept onto Jared's face as he read the message, feeling a mix of relief and pride. The journey with Maxwell was far from over, but today he knew they had overcome a major hurdle. As he lay down on his bed, staring at the ceiling, Jared felt hopeful for what tomorrow would bring. A new day, a fresh start, and an even stronger bond with his extraordinary co-star. Thank you all for taking the time to watch today's video. If you found this content interesting or helpful, don't forget to hit like to support us. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss out on our latest updates. We'd love to hear from you. Share your thoughts in the comments below or offer suggestions to help us improve. And if you think this video deserves a wider audience, please share it with your friends or on social media. Your support is our greatest motivation to keep delivering engaging and high-quality content. See you in the next video. Have an amazing day.